Guys, so today we're going to talk about three events in in English history. We're going to talk about the English Civil War, we're going to talk about the Restoration, and we're going to talk about the Glorious Revolution. So let's do some background information first of all. So, unlike France, remember Louis XIV in France we talked about was an absolute monarch. He could raise taxes when he wanted. Remember, we talked about the religion. He could get rid of the Protestants. He could get rid of the Huguenots. Well, in England, you have documents that keep England, limit the power of the kings. You had the Magna Carta, which was signed in 1215, which created a body called Parliament that would the king could not tax without the king's consent. Well, actually, Parliament comes in 1280. It develops out of the Magna Carta, and Parliament develops in 1280, which then they're again controlling the taxes. So the Parliament, when James I becomes king, who we talked about last class, they control the money. They control the taxes. And then you have English common law, which sets up that the law applies to everybody, even the king. This was not the case in France under Louis XIV. One of the big things in common law was right to trial by jury. And then over time, Parliament and the king are going to compete for power. And this is going to come ahead in the three events. So Parliament, legislative power, they were sharing power with the monarch, but it was like Parliament here, the monarchy here. Monarch had more power. Parliament wants to equal, and eventually it's going to overtake the monarchy. Both Tudors and the first Stuart monarch, James I, had conflicts with Parliament. On top of that, you have religious conflict. Remember, Elizabeth I creates the Anglican Church, where she creates this church that combines Protestant and Catholicism into the Anglican Church. Well, you had a group of Puritans, strict Protestants, who wanted to get rid of the Catholic practices in the church. The two key figures in the English Civil War are Oliver Cromwell and Charles I. Charles I became king when his dad died. What ends up happening when Charles I became king, in 1629, he needed money. He needed money badly. Well, probably 1628. He was in war. Parliament didn't want him in this war. They were upset about it, so they forced him to sign this Petition of Right, which will take power from the king and give some power to Parliament. In fact, no taxes. Parliament could approve new taxes, but once the taxes were approved, that was the end of their job. They're saying now no taxes without. Also, no forced soldiers housed in the private homes of citizens, which is going to be very interesting because if you look at our Bill of Rights, we have no soldiers housed in private. We have that. It's no forced quartering. No military law in peacetime. So the military cannot come into a person's house. And the king has to have a reason to put you in jail. Well, what happened is Charles agreed to this. Charles signed the document, said, fine, give me my money. I agree to this. Done. And then what he says is, all right, Parliament, you go home. He is determined never, ever to call Parliament back. He's done. He's got his money. He's not going to obey this. He's done. Well, what ends up happening is he needs money. The Scots rebel. So Charles is going to have to call Parliament back. Charles wants to be an absolute monarch. Parliament wants to share power. And then you have religious conflicts also happening. So what ends up happening? Charles calls Parliament. Short Parliament. It's a disaster, sends him home. Calls Parliament back again, long Parliament. They are fighting. Parliament is meeting, they're passing laws to take some of his power. Charles, by 1642, still doesn't have the money. He's done. He takes troops over to try and arrest the leaders of Parliament. This is when war breaks out. So this is a key event. Charles is then going to flee after he actually fails to arrest the members of Parliament. When he fails to arrest them, he flees north to raise an army and rally supporters so that he can have a cause. So that brings us to the two groups. You're going to have the Cavaliers. When you think of University of Virginia, they are the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are royalists, and they were loyal to the kings. You're going to have another group, the Roundheads, who are going to be Puritans, and they're supported by Parliament. And their leader is going to be Oliver Cromwell. They have the money. Remember, Parliament controlled the purse strings. So they have the money, and their leader is going to be Oliver Cromwell. And he has a huge military. He's going to defeat the king. So that's a key event. The trying to arrest the leaders, civil war, Charles is defeated. Then another key event is Charles I is put on trial. Of course, he says, I rule by divine right. You can't put me on trial. But the English put him on trial for treason. And I'm betting we can tell what the verdict is. He is guilty. He is executed. So now England has no king. England has no king. So you have a military leader in Cromwell. There was a constitution drafted. We have the first military state. Cromwell has the military. He says, no, we're not doing this. Tears it up. Cromwell is a Puritan. He begins to reform society, promote the Puritan morality. So they're trying to make it look like a Puritan society. So think about this. No theater, no gambling. Oh, and they cancel Christmas because that's a Catholic holiday to them. Although Cromwell will favor religious toleration for every religion except Catholics. So what ends up happening is Cromwell rules. Cromwell dies, military dictator. We have no constitution. We have no leader. So he dies in 1658. Parliament finally meets again and says, we got to figure this out. It's not working without a king. We need a king. Now we get our next event, the Restoration. They say, wait, Charles I has a son. Charles II, he's living in France. Let's bring him back. The monarch is restored. Yay! Everybody's happy. The monarch comes back, but he has to agree to rule by the petition of right. He has to agree to habeas corpus. Habeas corpus, this is a key result of the Restoration. Habeas corpus is a guarantee that if you are arrested, you are brought before a judge, and the judge determines if there's enough evidence to go forward with your trial. So it's going to give prisoners protection, and it's going to prevent the monarch from putting people in jail because they oppose him. Because if you bring that before a judge, it's not going to have the evidence. By the way, this habeas corpus is so important, it's not even in the Bill of Rights, it's in the actual Constitution of the United States. So, your Restoration, Charles II, no children. Well, he has children, but no legitimate children. So James II is next up. Problem, James II is Catholic. The English do not want a Catholic leader. They have had a Catholic king. They don't want a Catholic king. James II, though, has a Protestant daughter, Mary. So the idea is we'll skip James and we'll do Mary. Well, this is where you get the Whig and Tory parties form. The Whigs are not supporting James II. They oppose him and they want to put a constitutional monarchy and will make it Mary. The Tories are going to support James and say, the king, we have enough protections, we can move forward. What ends up happening is they meet, they work out their differences, and James becomes king. Yay! Couple problems. One, James II is asking for money to support his army. Parliament doesn't want to give it. James and Parliament are fighting, and he says, I don't need to listen to you. Kind of sounds like he didn't learn from his dad. He tried to get rid of the laws that barred Catholics from holding public office. So he's disobeying the will of Parliament. Parliament said, that's it. Oh, and the final nail in the coffin, Jane was married and he gave birth to a son. The son is the next in line for the throne. It's no longer his Protestant daughter, Mary. And they're like, no, we are not having a Catholic dynasty. So Parliament wrote William, who is married to James's daughter, and they asked William and Mary to intervene. And William of Orange, he's in the Netherlands. They asked him to intervene. And William of Orange gets an army and begins to invade England. James II's like, I saw what happened to my dad. I'm out of here. He flees. So he is overthrown. This is the third event, the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution is the overthrowing of James II. James runs away. William and Mary become king and queen of England. However, when they agree to this, a key event is they are going to create a constitutional monarch with the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights will be a list. It literally makes England and the Parliament, the King and Parliament, ruling together. The King can't suspend Parliament's laws. King can't, back to the taxing issue, there's freedom of speech in England. There's a right to petition in England. You're also going to get the right of Protestants to bear arms. We're going to look at this next class, but what you're going to see is a lot of things in the English Bill of Rights are going to be influenced in the American. So what the result of the Glorious Revolution is, you get constitutional monarchy developing in England. You will get England developing very, very limited democracy. And this is happening at the same time the English Revolution is these events in England, the English Civil War, the Restoration, and the Glorious Revolution are happening at the same time England is colonizing the 13 colonies. So with that, you'll be able to work on the graphic organizer with these notes. So thank you.